what are some takeaways that if they can act on those would make a difference?
I think the biggest piece that agencies need to consider as they bring in a new generation of firefighters. I know we talk a lot about generations. I do really think that it's important that when we bring first responders into our communities and into our agencies, that we understand who they are foundationally.
Command, Engine 10, first line attack, making entry.
All right, Wendy, I appreciate you taking time out of your day and your schedule. I know you're really busy, and I appreciate you sharing some stuff with us. I think you got a lot to offer as far as training and especially experience in such a specific field that fortunately doesn't happen as often as it could, but unfortunately still does. So again, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So I'd kind of like to start off with just kind of an introduction. We have some viewers from outside of the country and from all over the U.S. And just kind of an introduction of kind of who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Brian, for having me here. It's truly an honor and a privilege. And I really think that there's so much value in being able to share story and to be able to talk about experiences that we have, especially in the work that we do, because it plays such a part in our ability to process our stories and process the things that we've been exposed to. So being able to be on a podcast with you and share my story is a way to be able to hopefully help other people that have potentially been affected by something that they can relate to in the stories that or the experiences that I've endured too. So thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it so much.
We appreciate you sharing.
Yeah. So I wanted to be a firefighter since I was about 5 years old. I like to chalk that up to being nosy. I'm still nosy to this day. We lived in a neighborhood in Virginia where there was an apartment complex down the way. And of course, when you're 5 years old, everything seems much bigger than it really is, you know. And at that time, there were, I think, again, being five, an older group of people that lived there. They could have been totally middle-aged, you know, when you're 50 is
Everybody's
really
old.
Right, right. But they it was busy enough as far as law enforcement and fire and ambulance making runs to this particular complex quite routinely. And so now as an adult, the assumption is that maybe that they had more of an elderly population that lived there. And so whenever I would see them flying down our block with their lights and sirens going, I would chase them down and I would bug them, you know, what are you doing? What is this? How's this? Like, what do you have? What's a radio, you know?
Yeah.
And they were kind of kind to me and, you know, really allowed me to learn things from them, be able to hold the equipment and talked with me and really did not kind of toss me aside, so to speak. I, for the most part, it didn't feel like I was being annoying to them. And so that really drove home to me that this is what I wanted to do. This was the coolest thing ever. And so eventually, coming from a military family, we moved to California. And so my dad was brought over to a military base in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we moved to this little town where the city government wanted to really involve high schoolers in city government programs to get them to learn about city government in general, but also potential career fields within city government. And so they had opportunities to work within the police department, the fire department, assistant to the mayor, just different types of public service jobs within the community. And it was a paid job. And so you had to be a sophomore at least in order to get that job. And again, I was so blessed to be allowed to have that job when I was a sophomore in high school. And I stayed in that position for the remaining 3 years that I was there. And then alongside of that, they had a Fire Explorer program, a pretty active one at the
Yeah, I
time.
remember those.
Yeah, I know.
They're
It's
not around so much
they're
anymore, it seems like.
not. I know. I don't know why that is. I think kids are so busy now. It's like one more thing, but it was great. It was such a great mentoring program to me, which will play a little piece in my story later on.
Your department needs top-notch recruitment and training videos, but you don't have the time to create them. At Bella Media, we've already helped fire departments like yours tell their story. Let us handle the videos so you can focus on saving lives. Email us at info@bellamedia.com to get started today. That's info@bellamedia.com.
But I just loved what I did. And so, working for the fire department, I was the assistant to the fire chief's assistant, which meant that I filed paperwork, took out the garbage, and then as a fire explorer, we washed the truck, all the things that rookies would do. But their claim to fame and what they like to say is that they were the oldest fire department on the West Coast, and that New York helped them put their department together. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but culturally, that was such a cool story. And so the culture piece was really ingrained into me as a young adult or high schooler at the time, too. And this department started out as a volunteer, but also had a career side of things, too. So again, I was blessed in the aspect I got to see both sides of it. And we had a small industrial port as well in where I lived. And so I also learned about industrial firefighting. And that's where I ended up specializing in my fire service career.
Okay.
Coming out of high school, I received a scholarship and went to the fire academy, went through paramedic school. I did,
Sorry.
I know, right? Like, it's like we have to.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, so it's like I enjoyed it for a little while, but of course, it's if the fire side is in your DNA, that's where you want to go.
Yeah.
But I did the whole kind of post high school cool thing where you went and did the wildland forestry during the summer, and then you went and you worked ski patrol in the winter, or you did
That's
something.
cool.
Yeah, I didn't do the ski patrol part though. I just
Okay.
like skied. I was
I
not
got.
good enough to do ski patrol, but that's a lot of what these younger firefighters were doing was switching between the two, and it's so California, right? And then I met my husband in Utah, of all places, and fell in love with him pretty quickly. And it's really funny to say this, but a month after meeting him, he moved me down to Texas. And I always joked around that thank goodness he was a decent person because he could have totally left me dead in the Mojave Desert, and how my parents let me run off, when I was barely 20 is a mystery to me because surely if my daughter did that, I think I'd have a heart attack. But my husband was a Houston firefighter. He had the bigger pension. He was a few years older than me, and so more established in his career with the Houston Fire Department. So it was an easy move to make down here. And so I was able to join a small volunteer fire department that he was also a part of, and then found a job within the industrial world as a firefighter,
Okay.
and just really kind of started my career really essentially down here in Texas. And so I unfortunately was not able to work for that long within the career that I had loved so much.
Yeah, you had an injury, I think. Is that right
Yes,
about that around that time frame?
right,
Okay.
correct. So a year into being married, so we were still newlyweds. I am going to date myself here. I met him in 95. We got married in 96, and then I was injured in 97.
Goodness.
So, still a very much a baby firefighter, green. I did not know what I was talking about, didn't I? Just took direction, right?
Mm.
And even back then, to me, it wasn't as complicated as firefighting and tactics and things tend to be these
These
days.
days,
Yeah.
I agree.
It's changed a lot
So
just looking
much.
back. But the premise and the foundation of keeping firefighters safe, the foundation of that still is kind of the same, where when we look at firefighter injuries or firefighter fatalities, it tends to be the same things over and over and over again, that happens. And so with my particular incident, we had an apartment fire, a large apartment fire that required mutual aid from many different departments, including Houston and Seabrook and Nassau Bay, Webster, quite a few. There was probably over 150 firefighters on this particular incident. Yeah. And
How many alarms was that?
I believe it
Like
was a
four?
four alarm
Yeah.
fire. Yeah, it
Okay.
was it was
Really big.
huge, really big.
Okay.
And I actually had arrived late. So my department, which was volunteer at the time, had already responded. I was coming home from work, and so I went POV. And so what I found was the communication piece, that there were several different command stations put together, and they were all kind of doing their own thing. And so we've seen that before. I feel like it's getting better, but it
Yeah.
was very kind of much territorial, so to
Okay.
speak. We're going to do our thing
So
and
kind of
you do.
each organization set up their own thing.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, which you know where that will lead,
Yes.
is a communication breakdown. So when I arrived on scene, the building was kind of this L shaped, and I was sent over to the right part of the building. And so all of the doors faced externally into kind of a walkway. And as I was going up the stairs to meet up with the firefighters that were at the top, it sounded like a herd of cattle, like flying down those stairs. And what was happening was the roof was starting to collapse, and they were afraid of a pancake effect taking place, because it was 3 stories of living space, and then the fourth story, the bottom floor, was parking. So under parking underneath of the structure itself. So the roof had started collapsing onto the top floor, but they were worried about it continuing to
Continuing to
collapse.
collapse.
Correct. And so all of these firefighters, and again, it was probably 50 of them that were up in that area trying to force themselves down the stairway
Yes.
to make it to safety. So it really felt like a herd of cattle, and it sounded like one too.
Yeah, I bet it did.
Yeah. So we went back to our command with our chief and some other individuals, and they had gotten communicated back that they were no longer going to be sending firefighters into that side of the structure. It was all going to be from the other side of the building. And so they sent me with 3 other firefighters to go back upstairs to meet up with the crews that were up there, and with a command member that was up there, command staff. And so unfortunately, 2 of the guys were on their air packs. They were dialed in and breathing air going up the stairs, and they were bigger guys. And by the time they got to the top of the floor, they had sucked their bottles all the way down.
Good.
And it was an open fire, so there wasn't really a need to be hooked in yet. Just when you got up to that level and went into the structure itself. And so they had to send those 2 back down. And so it was just me and my partner at that time. And so the captain that was at the top of the stairs sent us down to the other captain that was at the far end of this part of the building. And he said to us, there is a fire in the kitchen in this one unit that was in the part that they had just said, we don't want anybody else in there. And so I don't know if he did not get that information.
That was the side you had just come from.
That was the side that I just came from.
Okay.
On the farther end, like I had come down from over here, but now
Yeah.
we were sent. And where this apartment was located was just around the corner. So we have this side over here, was just around the corner into that, no-go zone. And so who am I to say anything? I just, okay, I fully believed what he needed us to do and felt like that was the right thing to do. And I'm not going to tell a captain what to do, much less a high ranking career firefighter what to do. So my partner was on the nozzle, and we had to get around that corner and then snake back into the structure. And so it kind of created this S curve on the hose, and there wasn't enough slack to get into that hallway to get to the kitchen, which was on the right hand side where the fire was really still going. And I remember as we were walking through the entryway into this apartment complex, seeing the sky, like the whole ceiling or the whole roof had burned off by that point. And I was thinking, what are we doing here? But again, like I'm 22,
Hmm.
and I love fire, so
Yeah,
let's put it out,
let's do it.
let's
Yeah.
do it. And so my partner said, I don't have enough slack. Can you bring in more hose? And so I stepped out and I pulled the hose in. And as I pulled the hose in, he felt the slack and he opened up the nozzle. And the pressure was so great on that hose on such a weak part of the ceiling and the roof that it caused the ceiling to collapse on top of me. And it knocked my face mask off to the side and hit me in the head. And I was pinned for just a few seconds, but it was enough that when he was spraying it into the kitchen where the fire was, there was a small gap, a small kind of hole from where the fire had already gone through and where there had been destruction that already took place, where superheated gases and steam and smoke were coming through that little, and it was right onto my face. And so
While
I
your mask is off to the
while
side.
my mask is off to the side. So I'm trying to figure out like how to get things readjusted, how to get the ceiling off of me. And he had no clue what was going on because he had gotten inside the kitchen. And so I was breathing in all of this superheated gases and steam and things like that, and ended up with quite a few inhalation burns and injuries. I'm again so blessed to be a burn survivor, but not have the exterior burns to match the burns that are actually inside of my lungs, which causes a lot of issues that we can talk about as well. And so it didn't take very long. And these stories, sometimes when you are living through them, it feels like forever.
I'm sure it did,
Yeah.
especially, I mean, because that was probably very completely uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
it seems like, when you're going through things like that, it feels like it lasts forever.
Right. And when you work with patients or when you work with the community, when they call 911 and they have an emergency, they will always tell you it feels like it took forever for you to get here when really your response time is maybe 5 minutes
Yeah.
or and so it's kind of like this weird time warp where things slows down.
Yeah,
um,
we did some Mayday training. Anyways, I did a bunch of research on it. I think they were calling it temporal distortion
oh
or something to that
wow,
effect. I can't remember,
fascinating.
but
I'm gonna have to
yeah,
look that up.
hmm
It's a real phenomenon,
it is.
it's
Yeah.
just fascinating. So I was actually only pinned for a few seconds, maybe 10 or 15 seconds at the most,
Okay.
before my partner realized there was something that was going on and he was able to get me back out of the building.
How many
And
breaths do you think that you took? Do you think maybe like three or four? I'm sure it was
not
very painful.
even,
Just
probably two, probably two. It
that's
was
all it
short.
took.
That is all it took.
Wow.
And so I was rushed back down. We had an ambulance that was
Okay.
down there, and so I was treated in there, and then I was brought to San. There was a hospital down there. I think it's the Methodist Hospital now, but I was brought over there initially because my face was very red, and there was some peeling that was going on, but they didn't realize that the extent of the injury was actually in the lungs itself.
Okay.
So I started having difficulty breathing. And so I ended up being transferred into the medical center, into the burn unit over there. And lo and behold, I ended up having a brain injury as well. And they did not catch that for a while. It actually, I want to say it was about a month or so later that they caught the brain injury because they were so focused on the respiratory piece of it that, you know, it, I don't know. It was just very strange that it took a little while. It's just part of the plan, I guess.
Mhm.
And so the type of injuries that I had, I was only one of 10 in the world pre 9/11
Really?
to survive the respiratory burns that I had. I was studied by NASA physicians. There was a physician that worked both in the Methodist hospital system in critical care and with pulmonology, and then also who worked with the astronauts in space. And so I was part of a study to figure out like what do we do with this type of injury? What if we see this happen in space or whatever? And so I was
Plans for you.
absolutely for sure, for sure. And I will never forget, Brian, the moment the doctor came in. And I'll tell you that I kept up with my EMS, my EMS certifications. I do not like to work on an ambulance. The space is too small. Like, I don't want to deal with the patient. Like, I love the EMS part of it. I love medicine, but not that much, you
I
know?
understand. I understand.
So I wanted to keep up with my EMS certifications by working in the ERs as like a
Okay.
patient tech or an ICUs,
Yeah.
things like that. So I had worked in the Methodist in our medical center for several years as a patient tech in the ER there and met this doctor who treated me, who was part of my treatment program on the long term.
Yeah, I was about to say that's the same hospital that you were recovering in.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah. And I will never, and his name was Dr. Mario Gonzalez. I will never forget when he walked into my room and he said, "You will never be able to be a firefighter again." And it was devastating. It just like I didn't know what hurt worse. I didn't know if it was my lungs or my head that hurt worse or if the emotional psychological pain
You
was
put
worse.
so much into
Yeah.
to doing that career and then to be given that news, I'm sure it was.
And wanting to do that since I was 5, that was my identity. To be a firefighter was who I was. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I think there's so many of us that wrap ourselves into our identities of being a firefighter or being a parent or being whatever it is that you love to do, and not realizing what are the ramifications when that's taken away from you.
Yeah.
And so that was the piece of me that just changed that day. And basically, who am I?
Yeah.
What
What
is
do I
my
do
purpose?
now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what do I do now? What is my purpose in this life? This is what I thought God wanted me to do with my life. And so, again, that was another process that I had to really work through as I was dealing with the lung damage and the vocal damage. And you may hear it even in this podcast. Sometimes I'll start losing my voice because of the scar tissue that's
Scarring.
there.
Okay.
So it took about a year and a half to kind of make a recovery where I was well enough to be able to start processing that loss and that injury itself. And what's fascinating to me is I never would have thought of myself to have been suicidal at that part piece
Mm.
in time or that moment in time. But what I was doing, and this again will date me quite a bit, was we had newspapers at the time. You don't see too
Yeah.
many newspapers.
No
No,
podcasts.
yeah, right. No podcast, but all newspapers. That's where you got your news from.
Uh-huh.
And I would case the obituaries of the newspapers looking for 20-year-olds that have died and trying to figure out why they died, how they were so lucky that they died, because I was so miserable, not only with the pain of the injuries itself, but the aftermath of what we went through as a family. My husband and I, we lost a lot of friends. The fire department turned its back on us.
That happened to you.
Yeah, we are the little department that I was a part of, was supposed to merge with another department. And so they had gotten rid of all of their insurance. So there was no more workers' comp, there was no more health
Oh,
insurance. And so we were left to foot that bill, that medical bill, which was over $1 million when you start talking about burn units and lung and brain and recovery.
really expensive, really fast.
Yeah, very quickly. And my husband's insurance wouldn't cover it because
Do they consider it pre-existing? Is that kind of
yeah,
what the deal
yeah,
was?
pretty much. Yeah, because I had to go onto his insurance instead of going on mine or staying on mine because I had to lose my job. I was injured as a volunteer, so I lost my job, and then so I didn't have that insurance anymore. And then our little department didn't have insurance, and so I couldn't go on his insurance and have it covered. And so that was another kind of devastating blow. So not only am I dealing with the loss of my identity, but the identity that was really wrapped up around that because um, in the fire service, we are such a close-knit family and we tend to build our worlds around that. Most of our friends tend to be first responders. Most of the people that we hang around with tend to be first responders. We, you know, work in the field or volunteer in the field. And maybe if you're lucky, you know, your external social support system maybe comes from church.
Yeah.
And for the people that I know and what I have seen is it that tends to be it. There's not a lot of us that have friendships that are outside of that.
Agreed.
And
Absolutely. It's been my experience too.
yeah, and so when you lose all of that, who are you after that point in time? And so I would look at these obituaries of younger people and just think, if that would have been me, things would have been so much better for my husband. He wouldn't have to deal with paying for medical bills. For me personally, and what I have experienced over the years in working with catastrophically injured first responders, is there's kind of a common theme, not for everybody, but for many of them, that if you die in the line of duty, you're a hero. But if you're injured in the line of duty, you messed up somewhere. It was a mistake that you made. And so there's a lot of guilt and a lot of shame that gets associated with that. And then, of course, the long term recovery from that, especially in these days and with our culture, we want to move on quickly. And so, who has time to deal with somebody that's got long term medical issues and having to hear them complain about it? You know, we just don't have the tolerance for that anymore. We're ready to move on to the next thing. And so that leaves a lot of struggle for the person that's left behind dealing with that. And so I really felt like if I had died, things would have been so much better for my husband. And so my sister, who's 7 years younger than I, she would come and stay the summers with us or holidays with us. And she came out for a little bit and caught me reading the obituary. And she's like, you know, I think you have a problem.
Okay.
She's like, there's something not right about that. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right, you know? And so that's when I reached out to a therapist that had been referred to me through the state's brain injury program
Okay.
and started doing some work with her and realizing, you know, there's some post traumatic stress, obviously, that's going on. But also sorting through loss of identity, loss of job, loss of relationships that I had, all of those things. And through that, I was able to figure out a way to keep my foot in the fire service that could bring not only healing for myself on the psychological and the spiritual level, but also in maintaining a relationship with the fire service. As betrayed as I felt by the fire service and the brothers and sisters that I thought were in, you know, my corner, I still wanted to be a part of that. And, you know, I still had this mindset of forgiveness, of moving past that. And it's just family. We're a dysfunctional family. So let's get past that part
Very
too.
admirable.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And another piece of that too was when I was in the fire service as an explorer. One day I was able to go on a run of fire with the career firefighters because we could ride along with them during the day. Like we could have time off during our school hours and go ride with them. It counted for credit.
Oh, cool.
I know, it was awesome.
Yeah.
So we got out of the fire truck and the firefighter handed me his helmet. He was trying to get out of the cab and a piece of paper fell out of his helmet. And I, you know, handed it back to him and I'm like, something fell out. And it was a Bible verse. It was Isaiah 43, 1-2, where it talks about walking through the fire and not being burned.
Being burned.
Yes. And he said, here, this is a Bible verse that I keep in my helmet just to remind me that God is always with me in yeah, in these situations that we go into. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So I started doing that myself. You know, as soon as I got my official fire helmet, I wrote that thing down, I shoved it in my helmet.
Yeah.
And again,
I know a couple of firefighters that
do
have it.
that.
I know of one other. Yeah, yeah, he's a great guy. But I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt. But yeah,
No.
that's cool.
It's a powerful voice
It is.
verse that reminds us, of God's protection. And, after the doctor had come in to tell me about not being a firefighter again, I remember having this breakdown and John sitting there with me and I was like, but this verse promised me that, if I walked through the fire, I would not be burned. The flames are not going to set me ablaze. And he's like, that's not what God was talking about. God's not talking about, protecting you physically from the fire. He could, but he's not talking about that. He's talking about you spiritually, you going through a difficult time. You're facing the fires of what life has thrown at you, and he will get you through that as long as you keep your eyes on him and you cross through those rivers, you cross through those fires. And, unfortunately, what I've been through was also not only like the physical fire, but also the spiritual fire of this devastating loss. And so that verse became the catalyst of moving forward and trying to create an organization that would support and encourage and connect other firefighters that had been through a catastrophic injury. And again, to date myself, we already talked about newspapers in the 90s. But back then we had just AOL,
Yeah,
that was our
America
internet.
Online.
That's right. See,
Yeah,
I'm dating you too. I'm glad it's
you
not just
got
me.
mail.
You've got mail. Exactly. We did not have Facebook. We did not even really have, I don't even think there were news sites back in the day, maybe very small ones.
Yeah.
But it was not as prolific. The information was not as prolific as it is nowadays. And so trying to connect resources with four other injured firefighters was
Yeah.
difficult.
Hmm.
But it felt like that's what I needed to do in order for me to take what I had been through and find some sort of purpose in it. And so from that, Firefighter Ministries was born in
Okay.
1999.
Yeah, and so that was the inception of the task
Yes,
force. Okay,
absolutely.
gotcha.
And still underneath of the IRS, our name is Firefighter Ministries. We
Oh, okay.
just do business as the
DBA. I gotcha.
Texas Line of Duty Death Task Force.
Okay.
So I worked through that for a couple of years. And then in 2000 or 2001, a fire chief out in East Texas called me and said, hey, we've had a firefighter fatality occur. Can you please come out and help?
Okay.
And I said, absolutely not. Said, nope, that's not my thing. And I was still very bitter about God not taking me. Like, I still believe that I should have died. And my purpose was to serve these injured firefighters. And by the grace of God, that has not been the majority of what our organization does. It has turned into caring for the families of the fallen, and that turned quickly. So when I got to that fire station, it was a wake up call that it's not just me suffering, but that the agencies and the families suffer just as much. I still couldn't get past the if not more phase because, again, I was looking at that going, well, at least you don't have to suffer with that person dealing with a catastrophic injury. You don't have to live through all of that. So that was still my mentality, but what changed my vision on my own situation was these firefighters and this department went through a catastrophic loss that has changed them forever, has changed the structure of this family forever. And there's got to be a way for me to come in and provide something to them to be able to help out in some sort of way. And so that's where the task force ended up being born, was coming from that specific fatality. And for that department, it was their second fatality that they've had in 5 years.
Oh,
And
goodness.
so it was even more difficult there. But from that point on, it tended to be where we became the experts in dealing with line of duty deaths. And for a couple of years, I did it, but I was a little bitter underneath,
Yeah.
I loved the work, but I didn't
Yeah.
want to.
It sounds like you just kind of just got drawn into it by
Yes.
from for multiple reasons. So yeah,
Yeah, it really was truly, I think, God's plan to come in and do this
I
work.
think so too.
Nobody was doing it around the country. We were the first to actually organize an organization of other volunteers that were willing to deploy and go in and assist these departments with a fatality when they happened. And so around that same time frame in 2001, it was legislated here in the state of Texas that the state fire marshal's office would investigate line of duty deaths, just as a fact finding mission, not to cause any punitive responses, or
Yeah.
they just wanted to figure out why are firefighters dying and what can we do to prevent that. And so we fell underneath of them, even though we were our own nonprofit at the time. We fell underneath of them because we worked so closely together.
Okay.
And so if there was a fatality and they heard about it, then they would tell us about it and vice versa. And then we would be able to deploy to scenes together and we could help on the emotional aspect and support while they were able to do the investigative piece of it. And so for several years, from 2001 to about 2007-ish, is we worked side by side with them underneath of the fire marshal's office.
Was that planned out, or did it just happen
It
to
just
work that way?
happened. Yeah, it just
Wow.
happened to work that way. But it became very complicated because you are working with a government entity and they don't know what to do with a nonprofit entity. So the task force is considered a quasi-governmental entity, even though we're nonprofit. But it was easier for them just to have a working partnership with us as opposed to kind of falling underneath of them. So
Gotcha.
we split per se, but we still have a very close working relationship with them to this day. And whenever we have a fatality that occurs within the state of Texas or a catastrophic injury, we're in close communication with one another on how to proceed forward and what best way to be able to work with that agency. Because sometimes they're not ready to talk about the investigative piece yet. They still need to process what's just occurred. So we can come in and soften that blow for them and kind of get them prepared for to talk with the investigators. So it's been a wonderful working relationship with the state on that part of things. And then in 2006, we were brought into the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, which is congressionally mandated to provide support services to families of fallen firefighters. So they're mandated by the US government to have this program in place. But they too are nonprofit. And of course, that comes with not much government funding. So they have to raise their own money.
Unfunded mandates.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. We love those. So we brought our program to them and they took it and made it into a national program. And so what we built in the state of Texas, yes, what we built in the state of Texas has been used as the national model to build other states out. Now, of course, every state is very different and unique, and just based upon what their funding sources are, their program looks like, it may not be as comprehensive as ours, but they're out there doing the work and taking care of the families of the fallen. And I have to say that now doing primarily the work of the fallen for going on 25 years now, my life is completely changed because of the people that I've been able to work with, both on the fire side and the families and loved ones left behind too. It's just an amazing testament to resilience and
Absolutely.
giving back and growth after such devastating loss too.
So is the model similar to nonprofit works with fire marshal's office? Is that a similar model in other states?
You have a message the world needs to hear, but you're not sure where to start. At Bella Media, we make podcasting easy. Our studio is open Monday through Friday, starting at just $100. You bring the story, we provide the space. Let's get your voice out there. Email us at info@bellamedia.com to book your session today. That's info@bellamedia.com.
For some, there are. For our organization, we are unique in the aspect that we have those partner relationships with, say, the Fire Chiefs Association here in the state or state firemen and fire marshals. So we have these unique relationships. For other states, some of their programs are actually built underneath of the Fire Chiefs Association.
Okay. So they're built out as a part of that government
Right,
organization.
right, or whatever that other nonprofit is. And then some of them fall underneath the state fire marshal's office. We're pretty unique in the aspect that we are a standalone organization that just partners with these other different entities and have built that relationship up over the 25 years of doing that.
Yeah.
Takes a long time.
A lot of experience. You probably got to be one of the most experienced people in your field
I think
in
so.
this country, specifically in the fire service for sure.
Well, and it doesn't help that we always have the difficult, I don't want to put the word strange in there, but unique, maybe unique fatalities that other states have not seen before. And so usually when I call the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, because we work closely with them, we're considered a partner organization. Some of these other states will fall directly underneath of the national. Other states are their own entity, but we still partner with the foundation. But whenever I call, they're like, "Oh no, what do you have this time?" Because usually it's some unique
Yeah.
story. But yes, and the aspect of having the West explosion take place,
That
and
was a very unique situation.
it definitely was, and it was the largest loss of firefighter life following 9/11, because from after 9/11 there was the Charleston 9, and that became the
The
largest loss.
largest at that point.
Yeah, and then it was ours, and then unfortunately, right after ours was Yarnell with the wildland firefighters that had died in that wildland fire, with 19 of them, I believe. And so 2013 was a pivotal year, especially here in the state of Texas, because we had about 22 fatalities that year, and several of them were multiple fires. So we had the Bryan incident that kind of kicked the year off, unfortunately. Then we had the West explosion, and then we had the Houston hotel fire that killed four and eventually five. And so we had several of those multiple fatality incidents that were
I
just
remember that year.
difficulty. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was
Come to
rough.
think of it, yeah, that really was a tough year. I guess I didn't correlate all those to be occurring within the same year, but I guess that they really did.
Within a 6 month
Yeah.
period of time, if you think about it, which is a hard hit for,
In Texas for sure.
yes, absolutely,
You guys were
especially
busy.
we were definitely busy, but there's so many components that come into that where, you think about honor guard, or you think about the support structure to help out these agencies get through their deaths and their memorials and burying them. And so you have firefighters that are willing to come from all over the state to participate in those type of incidents. And so even those guys that were maybe up in Dallas or Austin are having to come down here where a majority of those fatalities took place. I mean, Bryan is just a hop, skip, and a jump from
Not
Houston.
too far away.
Yep, and then Houston and West. So it was a pretty catastrophic and pivotal year.
So it sounds like some of those resources got stretched pretty thin as a
Yes.
result of so many in such short period of time.
Yes. And one of the growth pieces for me personally, and then also for our organization, which kind of links into some of the other areas that we have expanded into, is the mental health component as well. I did not realize just how impacted my own volunteers would be coming out of the West incident. And I would say 90% of them, if not all of them, were impacted deeply in some way, shape, or form. Most of them came out with post traumatic stress. A few of them had turned into the disorder or the injury itself. There was a lot of struggle and a lot of mental health struggle for my family liaison officers, the honor guard, the people that were working logistics after West. And so I realized I've got to do better in that piece of it and taking care of my own. I feel so blessed in the aspect that I believe God has given me some pretty big shoulders to carry a lot of really heavy things and not be impacted by them. And it's just the assumption that I've had, and we know what assume means. It was just the assumption that I had that we love this work so much that we're not going to be impacted by it. But how can you not be?
Yeah, how could you
How
not
can you
be?
not be? And so I saw many of my people really spiral after that and trying to kind of clean up that mess. was difficult and challenging for me to do, but gave me an eye-opening experience of I can never let this happen again, whether or not we are dealing with a single fatality or we're dealing with a multiple fatality. It's we're still being impacted by that because not only are we unique in the aspect of being first responders ourselves and choosing to have this profession, whether or not you're career or volunteer, we're choosing to go into these incidents that are going to leave a scar and going to leave a mark on us. We cannot leave this profession without being changed in some way. We all are faced with horrible
I
things.
completely agree. There's a lot of people out there that say, "Oh, it's not gonna affect me," but I just don't see. I mean, maybe there's definitely people, some that are stronger, like yourself, and others that might not be. But you can't walk away from this career
No.
without it affecting you somehow.
Absolutely. Whether or not it changes your perspective, it changes the way you have an outlook on things. Maybe it's a positive, but we all come out with some sort of wound. To have people that not only do that work, but jump in and do death work and get in the midst
Yeah, in the
of
middle of it.
traumatic grief and loss to a brother or sister firefighter is a whole nother level of just difficulty. And it just, I have no words really that I have been incredibly blessed to have individuals that are willing to do that and have been with me for 20 plus years. And maybe every once in a while they need to take a year off or whatnot, but they stay in this work and they stand alongside of me. They're not getting paid. Nobody's getting paid to do this. So not only are they being exposed to what they see in their everyday job, but they get put into the middle of grieving families that have had unexpected, often traumatic loss and walk those families through that, and sometimes in such a deep and meaningful way. So, for example, my state honor guard commander, so we have regional honor guard commanders, and then I have a state honor guard commander who oversees all of our honor guard and helps deploy them out there. But when he deploys and he goes out into the field, he gets down to the point where he insists on dressing that firefighter or the police officer. We do fire, police, and EMS. But he will go into that funeral home and he will insist on dressing that firefighter and making sure that he had
With the attention to detail, is
everything.
that kind
Yes.
of his what
Attention to
he's
detail, and he wants to be the last hands that
okay?
touches that firefighter from firefighter to firefighter. If you cannot put your uniform on, I will put your uniform on for you. And then he's gone as far as several times where if the individual is being cremated, he will walk with them into the crematory and push the button because he wants to be the last person, firefighter to firefighter. He wants to make sure that that brother or sister, it's a firefighter that is the last person that has anything to do with that
That
individual.
is so deep and meaningful.
Absolutely. And those are the people I'm surrounded by.
Amazing.
It's amazing to me. And so I'm blessed. I'm definitely blessed on that. Um,
Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah.
The things that you guys do. I mean, and there's so much that you guys do. Kind of like that example that people don't hear about. That there's a side to this that's so personal
Yes.
and it's so meaningful that it's almost hard to convey in words because
Yeah.
it's emotion more than it is
It
word.
is. And you yourself being in this career, there are incidents that we respond to that we just can't wrap our minds around. I tend to think back to Harvey, or even this year, with Beryl and our
Yeah.
derecho storms, and you come out and you look at the devastation or the destruction of whatever incident you're on, and you don't have to say a word. You just know that your fellow first responders understand exactly what your look is. Like the look on your face going, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, there's no words for this.
There's not.
There's no words
Just
for
deer in
this.
the headlights, 1,000-yard gaze.
Yeah,
Like, oh my
yeah.
goodness.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
there's just not words for it sometimes.
No.
Absolutely.
But what's really kind of grown from that and the experiences that we've had over the last few years, especially now as the suicide rates are starting to increase really across the board
I
for
was
all
I was going to ask
professions.
you about that. Yeah, what kind of insight do you have on that particular topic?
Yeah, so, of course, we look at our own profession. We don't tend to look at people that are chefs or medical doctors or nursing. We don't tend to look at other professions. We tend to look at our own profession and go, we have a high amount of suicides. Why do we have so many suicides? The suicides are increasing, but it's not just us in the first responder world. The suicides in general are increasing. And believe it or not, first responders are not even in the top 10 of professions that have the most lives lost to suicide.
Okay.
We're below that. It's construction workers, it's sales force people. There's other like bartenders. It's really fascinating. Other professions that have a higher rate than we do. Believe it or not, the individuals that are in the restaurant world have a very high rate of suicide.
Really?
So I think there's a sense of comfort in knowing that we're not alone in this, that really it's what's happening today, what is happening within our society, within our culture, um, foundationally that's causing suicides to go up. Let's start there and look at that piece of it.
Hmm.
And then what's going on within our own profession that's driving these individuals to have suicidal ideations or attempt or complete a suicide. And so it's such an onion, and doing the work over the last few years, especially working
Layers. Yeah.
for sure. And we've taken on more and more families that have lost first responders to suicide. And it's not as easy as just saying, if only that person would have talked to me, if only that person would have opened up. There's so many different aspects of that human being that cause them to follow through with that decision. And so there's so much more of a need to study it. And I know that there are scientists that are out there and researchers that are looking into that and trying to figure out, okay, what is it that we need to do to be able to support the firefighter holistically, not just on the mental health side, but physically, spiritually, all of those components. What do we need to do to be able to strengthen that first responder to be able to make it through their career? And be able to leave it either as a long-term volunteer. We see such a high turnover rate. And that's due to a lot of different factors, but we don't want one of those factors to be because of the exposure that they have within their career. But how can we make these individuals start off with a strong foundation coming into our service? How can we support them along the way? And then how do we ensure that they're going to be taken care of mentally when they retire? Because that takes away all of our support systems. So retirement is a very difficult phase as well for first responders, whether or not they're retiring again from a volunteer department or a career department. Leaving your social support and your social structure is devastating.
Complete
It
180
is.
in life
Yes, it
to
is.
walk away from it after so long.
And going back to the identity piece, I think that for probably 90% of us, our identity goes away. And how do you deal with the loss of your identity? And that's where you see a lot of chiefs or a lot of firefighters that will retire out of one department and become a chief of another,
Yeah.
you
Like,
know?
well, I thought I was going to retire,
Right,
but I want to go
right.
back to it.
And I think part of it too is what we're seeing nowadays, especially in the last, I think, 10 years, especially, is a lot of these firefighters that are getting towards the middle to the end of their career. They're going back to school and they're getting their master's
Yeah.
so they can go somewhere, because they know
Do something
retirement.
emergency
Yes.
services related. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so to close, and we're gonna have you back for another episode, but to close with, I'm very curious. You've done this for a long time. You have a lot of experience, and probably nobody's up to speed on these topics more than you are in the state of Texas, if not the United States. So, for those that are listening right now, what advice would you have for an organization to make the biggest difference within their organization as all these topics correlate? What are some takeaways that if they can act on those would make a difference?
I think the biggest piece that agencies need to consider and command staff needs to consider as they bring in a new generation of firefighters. I know we talk a lot about generations. Like for many years, we kind of harped on the millennials. It's the millennials, and now we're like the Gen Zers,
Yeah.
and whenever Alpha decides to come up, I do really think that it's important that when we bring first responders into our communities and into our agencies, that we understand who they are foundationally. We really have that relationship when we can. I know for larger entities that's harder to do, like when you're talking about a Houston Fire Department or a Dallas, even mid-sized departments, it can be hard for a chief or chief level officers to really get to know their firefighters. But when you take a shift per se, and you have their captain or their senior captain, I think relationship is so vital, and that there's time that's spent building those relationships with their people, getting to know them, understanding who their family and their social support is, finding out what kind of baggage they're carrying into this department. People come in with a trunk full of other things that we have no idea will impact their
Yeah,
jobs.
and they're all so different.
They're also different. And it doesn't mean that we need to take those things on. But when you understand what a firefighter, brand new firefighters coming in with, it's better for you to be able to help them cope with the things that they will come to see in their careers. And just being prepared to support them in the best way that they can, and having resources available, whether or not you can personally, financially cover counseling or get apps or whatever the new thing is that's out there. There's resources that even departments that don't have big budgets can find and have on hand to be able to support their agency no matter what they're going through, whether or not that be somebody who's struggling with depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress, or all the way up to dealing with the death of a fellow first responder. And that can mean off-duty death, it can mean on-duty death, it can mean line-of-duty death, but we're going to face some sort of death within our organization, some sort of loss, and how do we deal with that? And so having those plans in place, not just strategies and tactics for dealing with fighting fire or working a call, but how do we develop strategies and tactics for taking care of each one of our firefighters that are underneath of our care? I think that's the most important piece. Get to know your people in and out.
I can come up with a plan too, it sounds like, of some
Yes.
sort of a way to deal with it before the problems
Yes.
arise.
Right.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here. Your
Thank you.
story is just amazing.
Thank you.
And I think God is working through you in
Thank you.
so many different ways. More ways than we were able to discuss today at
Yeah.
this point. So we're going to, there's going to be an episode 2, and we're going to talk to you again because you have some personal experience that I think nobody in this world has the knowledge and experience that you do historically, as well as going through the loss of a loved one. So I think your story can help a lot of people. So we'll have you back.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you
look-
so much, Wendy.
Thank you so much. I look forward to it.
Command, Engine 10. First line attack, making entry.